everyone. This is the Middle Ground Book Festival's cover conversation. And joining me are Alda Dobbs, Remy Lai, Mirelle Ortega, Jade Rector, and Emily Daluga. And we'll go through and introduce ourselves. Shall we be alphabetical? Alda, do you mind starting?
No, sure, no problem. My name is Alda P. Dobbs, and I am the author of Barefoot Dreams of Petroluna. It's coming out September. It's a middle grade historical novel. It's inspired by my great-grandmother who lived through the Mexican Revolution back in 1913 and trying to escape the violence in her homeland and crossing the desert in Mexico, trying to reach the safety of the U.S. border. And I am originally from Mexico, but moved to San Antonio when I was a kid in Texas. And I'm now back in Texas. I've lived in different places all over. And so I'm happy to be back in Texas. Thank you for having me, by the way.
Thank you. So Emily would be next.
Yeah, hi there. I'm Emily. I'm an associate editor over at Abrams Books, which means I get to work with authors to make changes and make their book as great as it can be. And I've been in publishing for about 4 years now and very happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Okay, Jade?
Hi, I'm Jade Rector. I'm a junior designer over at Abrams Books, so I get to work very closely with Emily. I work on all of our imprints, so I work on board books, picture books, middle grade, and YA. So the middle grade covers are always super, super fun. So I'm really excited to chat.
Okay, Mirelle?
So I'm Mirelle. I'm an illustrator for Kid Lit, middle grade, and animation. So I do pictures for a living. I think that sums it up.
Okay, Remy.
Hi, I'm Remy, and I'm an author and illustrator. And my latest book is a graphic novel called Picasso. So this is out with Macmillan, and it's about a dog who goes shopping.
It's so cute.
Thank you, Remy. And I'm Rosanne Parry. I'm the author of many middle grade books, the latest of which are Whale of the Wild and A Wolf Called Wander. I'm also an independent bookseller at Annie Bloom's bookstore in Portland, Oregon. So I love talking about covers and how they get decided and chatting with customers about them and chatting with industry professionals too. So let's get started with Emily. Emily, can you walk us through sort of the timeline of what happens in book cover design from you acquire the book and then what?
Yeah, so publishing has kind of notoriously a very long tail of it takes quite a while between a book being acquired and it getting on the shelves. That can be longer, especially if the book has illustrations, it's a graphic novel or a picture book, or the book has a seasonal tie-in, if it's a Halloween book, we'll want it in fall to be in spooky season. So I can kind of spring 22 is what we're actively working on right now. And I can kind of base that timeline off of my edit letter for spring 22, because I've acquired a lot of my spring 22 books a little while back now. But most of my spring 22 books, I started really actively working on beginning of this year, January, some over the holidays as well. And so I'm reading through that first time and starting to get ideas of tone and the characters that I might want featured on the cover. And we kind of start having discussions of what the covers might be for the entire season in February for the spring books. And that starts with our associate publisher sending us a fun little email being start putting together cover memos for the designers, which are these fun little documents where we're here's the tone of the book. Here are some books we think it could sit beside. Here's any of the author's previous books. If it's a series, here's the series so we can make them all look the same and make them all look real nice. And then once we've submitted those to the designers, our wonderful designers like Jade start looking and seeing those, and based on the ideas that we've proposed, as well as ideas the author may have. Sometimes the author's I really want to see my main character on the cover, or I'm tired of seeing main characters on the cover, type only. Various things. The designer starts noodling and thinking of what artists might be good, and they kind of create this lovely little pitch deck for us that's here's the mood I'm seeing and maybe some imagery and some artists. And once we discuss and kind of get approvals from the higher powers, we can reach out to the artists and be we would love you to design this cover. And Oftentimes they say yes, which is fab. If they don't, we ask another person until we've hired someone, and then we start getting sketches from them, and we share the sketches with the author usually pretty consistently, because we obviously want the author to be happy with their book. And also, like, selfishly, I have a very bad memory, so I want to make sure the characters look right, or like any details look right, and the author knows those details better than I ever will, so they can check for that. And as the sketches get tighter, we start sharing it with the rest of our department. We have like a fun cover meeting that has like all the designers, the editors pop in and out, sales and marketing comes, and like the publisher and associate publisher come, and they start looking at the covers as well. Sales and marketing will chime in based on their market knowledge, as well as like sales will chime in based on what they know their accounts want. Like Target and Barnes and Noble and like indie bookstores all want very different things. So we kind of balance all those things based on what we think the book will do best in the account. And it's kind of then just a cycle of like revisions are made as needed, we make changes. The artist often like comes up with quite a few options, so we can like pick from those options until we have one that's more final. And the final covers for spring 22 are like coming around right about now. So it's like about a 6-month process in total from like the first edit letter, for novels at least. It differs book to book, but to the final cover. And then this is for spring 22, so it's still like 9 to 12 months until the book's on the shelves. So all in all, it ends up being like a 1.5 year process in like, and this is for a pretty ideal schedule. Some books take longer, obviously, depending on like the number of edits made, and like some covers take longer. But yeah, about a 1.5 years in the end, and a lot of different voices chime in, which is fun.
Excellent. Excellent, excellent. Thank you. So Jade, can you talk to us a little bit about what a typical day is like for a cover designer?
Yes, absolutely. So Emily, really, it's so interesting to hear another perspective on it, because we work so closely together on these cover designs. It's interesting. I know it differs between publishing houses, but I know at some houses, cover designers are only cover designers, and that's really what they dedicate all of their time to. But at Abrams, we all kind of share between the imprints of picture book and YA middle grade. So depending on the time in the season, like when we're in February, when we're kind of going through, like Emily was saying, we'll put together mood boards, do some illustrator research. I love illustrator research and really kind of putting together my little bookmark chain of every single illustrator I've ever seen that I really want to hire. And illustrator outreach as well, just kind of building my list and networking. But then, yeah, once we're able to put together our cover lists for our editors, just discussing with our team, bringing in sketches and kind of noodling about what's going to work best for that cover. In a day, it's interesting because we don't always get to read the full manuscript when we first start the cover design, because it's usually with the editor and the author, and they're still kind of picking it apart. So with our like limited view and our discussion, it's really trying to find the base vibe and feel of the book, and finding really what's going to work in that genre at the time. But other than that, I mean, in a typical day, because we're balancing so many different imprints and plates, lots of contract negotiation, lots of interior design for the typesetting work, and design tweaks. But the type experimentation, I think, is my favorite part right now of cover design, because there's so many different, whether you're hiring someone to do your type or finding the best way to fit with your cover designer's work, or cover illustrator's work. No, it's fun. Cover design is very fun. And like Emily said, there are a lot of voices, so it's a lot of conversation, especially in the sketches stage, really trying to find what fits. But yeah.
My daughter is a designer as well. She works at Charles Bridge, and when we drive together, she shouts out the name of fonts on signs as we pass.
Absolutely.
Thing. I adore it.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And being able to see, especially when it's a weird font, like one that I've seen once or twice on some font foundry website, I'm like,
exactly. In the wild, yes. It is very fun.
In the wild, for sure.
It is very fun. Awesome. So Alda, sometimes I know authors like have a vision board or a concept or a preconceived idea about their cover, but don't necessarily know what's behind the scenes until their cover is finished. Who are the people who contributed to the input on your cover? Do you know? Or can you talk to us about the cover of your book?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, this is my Barefoot Dreams is my first book, so there's so much learning to do, you know, about the process and whatnot. And of course, time's one of them. It's not quick. It takes time. And yeah, they asked me. My editor is the one who came to me and asked first, okay, can you provide what do you have in mind? You know, not that we're going to take it, of course, you know, but just kind of like and of course, that being the writer, I've been working on this for 5 years. I have all sorts of images in my head, so I tried my best to describe it with words because I'm a writer. I mean, I was tempted to draw it out. I'm like, no, don't go there. You know, you're going to ruin the concept or whatnot. So I wrote the words and I explained it to her, and she took it and kind of, because I used to be in the military, so there's a chain of command. You know, you have to follow through. So I learned that was the same way in publishing. So my editor went to the art department to the artist, and they, you know, that's the way the flow of the communication. So it was interesting to get the feedback later on, or get the initial sketches. And they didn't show me all of them. They just showed me one. Later on, I spoke. By the way, the great illustrator for this one is John J. Cabway, and he's phenomenal. I love the work he did on this. But later on, he told me he had about 3 to 4 sketches, but they only showed me one, which, you know, I fell in love with. And there were details that I picked up on. For instance, the cacti, because it talks about a desert in Mexico. So obviously a lot of people right away think of the big seguros cacti. But where I'm from in Mexico, it's a different type of cacti. So I mentioned that little detail just to make it more authentic. And yeah, they went back to the artist and yeah, they changed it. So I was really excited that just to give it that, because it's very regional, the language and the customs and the culture. So that was nice. And so it was that back and forth communication. And I learned the fact too, because when I got the art, it's different, you know, a little bit the colors and the texture and all that. So that's something that I enjoyed seeing the process too. That I saw this, and then once you see the finished book, the jacket itself is just gorgeous. It's amazing. It's like night and day. It's so vivid, and the details, and you just see and appreciate all the work that goes into the art department. Source Books, they did a phenomenal job too, gathering just the concept of the story. And on the cover, there's so many details in the cover that you could pinpoint in the story, so it speaks to itself. So that's what I like, that they got together. And then was another thing too, they sent the art from the back, and I had a little bit of input too, and it's little small minor detail, but yeah, it's just neat to see that work being done back and forth. And it's just gorgeous work, and I'm so grateful of how the process and how it works, and just the editor. I worked with Molly during this, and Molly and then Molly Cusick and then Wendy McClure. So both of them were great in communicating with me with the art department and John. So that was my process.
Yeah, that clear communication, I think, is so important. And I was super grateful when my designer for my wolf and whale books said, when we're having a conversation about the animals, because your illustrator's in Spain for the wolf book, she said, please use the common name and the scientific name so she researches the right animal. I was like, oh, right.
That's true. No, you're right, because that's what they asked me too for historical pictures from the Mexican Revolution too. So I had tons of them, and I sent those, and they read those, and I'm glad they used those as a research too.
Yeah. I think any like reference photos that you have for your setting are very helpful. Very cool. Awesome. So Remy, you're both the author and the illustrator. I can barely draw a bath, so I'm totally impressed by anyone who can draw. So how does that work when you're making your own cover though? How do you get to pick what's on the cover, or what is that process like?
I have all the power. No, I'm just kidding. That's not true. It's not. Cover design is one of the most fun process of making a book. I get to work with my editor as well as the book designer. So what usually happens is they would ask me, what do you think the cover should look like? So then I would sketch out ideas. Sometimes I have 5 ideas, sometimes I have 10. So I just give it all to them, and then they would pick a few for me to refine a little bit so that they could bring it to the mysterious, the team. I don't know who they are, but the team, I'm guessing it's the marketing people. And then they would pick one that they like the best. And then I would do the final line art for that. And so for my first 3 books, I did all the line art, but we actually have a colorist who colors the books. So then the colorist would color the books, and then I would give them like my feedback, like if I love it or if I needed something to be tweaked. So for my first 2 books, I actually have the same book designer who worked on these 2 books. So Carol Lee, so she's awesome. And so then one of the best parts about the book cover is that I love to see what is on the spine. so this one I did draw the little boys, and then I actually didn't know what Carol placed on the spine, the clouds here, until I got the book. So that was really cute. So I love that. And then for Picasso, I worked with Mallory Greig, and then the colorist. So the colorist for Fly on the Wall and Pie in the Sky is MJ Robinson, and for this one is Samantha Bennett. So it's almost the same process, I would say. And then but for this one, I actually had kind of a different idea at first of what I thought the cover should look like. At first, I didn't want the girl on the cover. I just wanted the dog. But that's because I was really biased. I just really want the dog. And then my editor and book designer, they kind of said, they gently persuaded me and said, I think we need both the main characters on the cover. So I said, okay. And then this one was also actually a type that I actually hand drew. So I actually hand drew this. It was just really quick. I just did it as a sketch. I just thought that the book designer was going to replace it as she did in the previous books. But then they ended up liking it. So then it ended up on the cover. So that was pretty cool. And then but for my books that are coming out in 2022, I did all the colors also. So that one didn't have any back and forth with the colorist. And so yeah, that's and do I still have time? Yes. One of the other parts about cover design is also because I'm published by Macmillan, but I'm in Australia, so I have an Australian publisher also. So sometimes they do like a variation of the cover, and then they would which is always really interesting to me, like what different countries like. So for example, this is the Australian cover for Pie in the Sky. So you can see it's just a tiny bit of difference there. But then the UK version is so different, like that. Yeah, and then there's a French version, which is also different. And so that part is always really fun to me. And so for the cover, when they're asking me what it should look like, so sometimes we would pull illustrations from inside the book itself, and so usually they would have the main characters on the cover again, doing things that they do in the story. So that's what I try to keep in mind when I'm giving them ideas for the sketches. And usually, sometimes it would be very different what they want and what I think it should be. And sometimes I would like try to beg my editor, can I have it this way? But then I always know at the back of my mind that like they're the professionals and I would leave it to them, but I would just say what I want, and then after that, that's up to them.
Right. Yes. I always feel like my editor probably has pressures she is not telling me about. So, and maybe that's just as well. I have enough worries of my own, but yeah, great. It's like knowing when to say, no, this is really important, and when to go, I should just back off of that, is its own little art. Right. Thanks, Remy. And so Mirelle, so when you are getting a commission from a publisher to work on a cover, what is your process there?
Well, my process is usually after like I've been brought on into the project, and there's like a whole part of that with the agents and like what's going to happen. But after that all's been solved, I get to be introduced to the designer, and then the designer kind of holds my hands really gently and tells me everything that her and the team have decided, the mysterious team behind everything. And it really depends a lot on each project. And if it's like a book series, because I've done some book series, then from there they want the characters, because we're going to spend a lot of time with the characters. And if it's a standalone book, I usually would get like ideas for like, sometimes I get like the full manuscript, which I love because I love middle grade books, and I love reading them. And I also think that I do my best work when I've read the book, because I've spent all the time with the character and I know how they are, and I can also put a lot of little details in it that I couldn't otherwise. But then that's not possible all the time. Sometimes I would get like maybe a few chapters. Sometimes I'll get just like a little paragraph and like, this is what we're thinking for inspiration. Sometimes there's very specific things like where it's like one paragraph, and then my job is a little bit like bringing out some sketches that are different but of the same thing. And some other times there's more of like it's more of a blank check, and they're like, oh, just go crazy. And then I have to, I always try to turning sketches that are very different, because I want to get like a better sense of, give them a lot of variety to choose from. And then the team will pick what they like, or one specific one, or sometimes it'll be a mix of a few elements in different ones, because I do very different ones. And from there, depending on also the project, but from there's usually a color like sketch part in which we pick the palette for the book and everything, how it's gonna look. Sometimes it's kind of rare, but sometimes it's like there's a palette from the start, usually when it's a book series, because every book has to have their own color. So when that happens, that's a little bit easier, because it's like, stay within these 3 colors. And when not, it's a lot funnier, because I get to play with a lot of different colors and styles. And when that's done, again, they pick. I don't know how much the author is involved. I know sometimes I get like, yeah, the author really loved this, but I'm like, I really don't know who decides. But I try to make it so all of the ones that I send, I personally love, so that I'll be like, I will not be disappointed whatever they pick. And then I'll just move to final artwork. I'll finish, I'll tighten up everything. I'll send the final painting. Sometimes I do lettering for the covers, sometimes not. And then, I will hear back with any notes or any changes that they have at the very last part. Or sometimes they like to do it by stages, so I'll be tightening it up and sending as I go. And then sometimes they'll be like, this is good enough. Like, I'm like, okay, I was not done, but okay. we'll go with that. But yeah, it's always, I love it. It's always very different work for every project. It's a different thing. I love when I get to do a lot of research for different, especially if I get to read the book and like think about the places the books are set. Like Alda was saying, sometimes there's like specific things that you can put in each cover to make it a little bit more special. That's it.
Very cool. I was thinking actually in the bookstore earlier this month, I had a kid who came through one of those big series that has a different color for each book. And I was like, and which one do you need? And he was like, I read the red one and the green one and the blue one, and I need the what colors after that? And I'm like, that is not in my catalog, but let's go look at the shelf. But maybe for older kids, it doesn't matter so much. But for those younger middle grade chapter books, I think that different color for each one really helps us track. So,
or for visual people like me, I would have been that person for sure.
Right. And I'm also super grateful. I think way more about the spine of a book. As a bookseller, I think about that way more than I ever did more, because when that's, you know, you have this much information to give them in the bookstore, it better be really good. And so I'm always so appreciative when a team has designed a really good spine for a book. So let's go to some general sort of anybody can answer this questions. And this is something that I think a lot of people are actually curious about. And that is there anybody outside the industry who weighs in on covers? Do you ever ask kids? Do you ever ask teachers? Do librarians ever weigh in on it? So for whoever wants to take a look there, dive right in.
I can jump in and talk a little bit about this. We typically don't we unfortunately, I wish we did have like a panel of children that we could just send book covers to see if it was like good or not, because that I feel like would be very fun, number one. Number two would help a lot. And we tend to I ask friends that I know who are librarians or teachers or artists in their own right to be like, hey, can you look at this and see if I'm not noticing something or being weird with a comment I have, etc. But we do, since there is so much time between when we get the final cover and when we're actually printing the book, the cover will be out online. So if we see people responding to certain things oh, this is a horror book and it's bright yellow and sunny, why did you do that? We can make adjustments between even an ARC advanced reader copy is printed and a final book is printed. If we see enough of a comment or a comment lands with us and we're oh yeah, it's a good point, we should make it creepier. So we do have time to make those changes if we hear them and they're oh, we should change that. But I think the process kind of differs editor to editor and designer to designer as far as who we reach out to and who sees it ahead of time, I think.
Yeah, I think if I'm remembering, I think booksellers have a way in the Edelweiss system to make comments like that. I think I've seen a few comments there where booksellers can be like, this is too much like this other book, or yeah, that kind of thing. Excellent. And so just for all of us, maybe, is there a particular cover style that you like, a particular cover trend that you think is particularly appealing, something that as a reader, when you go into the bookstore, you're like, I want that book for sure. And why don't we just go around, shall we go by alphabet again? That's kind of the easiest way. Go ahead, Alda.
I like book covers that are, or the art where it captures details of the story. Like Mirelle was talking about, when you read the book and you get familiarized and you insert details in there, because to me, it's kind of, I look at the cover and I try to tell what the story is going to be about. And then as I read it and I look at the cover back again, kind of deciphering what, I'm like, oh yeah, that's why, and it just connects me more to the story and to the artist and just the whole package. That's one thing I realized as a writer, that there's just so much work that goes into a book, and you appreciate that teamwork, that goes into that story, because the cover is just so powerful. It's the first thing they see, before you even read a single word. So that's what's mesmerizing about those covers that capture those small details of the story. So those are my favorite ones.
Excellent. How about you, Emily?
Yeah, I mean, I love a beautifully drawn face on a cover, which I feel like I'm spoiled because that's a huge trend that a lot of middle grade and YA have beautiful oil paintings of faces that are really cool, as well as surrealistic or unconventional elements Case and Calendar's King and the Dragonflies has really cool foliage behind the character, or Wilder Girls, which is a YA where her face is kind of ribboned up and there's foliage growing out, maybe foliage as well. It's a fun theme. But yeah, I feel like there's a lot of really lush, beautiful high art on covers sometimes that I'm immediately I want to own this just because it's beautiful to hang up.
Yep. Okay, Jade.
It's so tough, but I think as an illustrator and designer and someone that focuses a lot of energy also into picture books, anything super highly illustrated, and I love a younger middle grade with some really, really iconic characters, a fun scene, especially if it's beautifully integrated with the type. I love central type. That isn't always possible based on sales criteria and the way that things are displayed on shelves. And I know this, but I love central or bottom type. And I feel like that's what I always pick when I go into the stores. But But yeah, a good character, my heart. I love it.
Yeah, you know, see, I really like on a picture book. I like the bottom or middle type because it's often very artful, but how books are displayed in our bookstore, usually you can only see the top third. And so I'm like, which is terrible. And we need a better system, but lots of us have. And so, like, if there's no information on the top third of the picture book, it's like, look, blue sky.
Absolutely. That's so many of our cover sketch discussions are us showing, we're like, well, we know this one won't work, but look at this beautiful cover. Like, look at this art.
I know. Yeah, limitations of the market, and I know a lot of libraries are the same way. So yeah,
absolutely, totally.
Mirelle, how about you?
I'd like to say all of the above. I really love everything. I think for me, my number one thing is color. So when like a cover has like a very vibrant like pop of color or like complementary colors, it was like I don't know, like the background is kind of like fading and the character is popping, like a good focal point. I love that. I love integrated font or like a good hand letter title. I was that kid who bought a ton of books just for the cover, and a lot of them were not even kids' books. And I was like, I don't even know.
Right.
But yeah, I love art, so
inspiration, definitely. Okay, and then Remy, what do you think?
I really like Jade. I really love the highly illustrated ones, but maybe that's because I'm also the illustrator. But then I also, when I go to bookstores, I also gravitate towards the highly illustrated ones. And then I like the ones with kind of like a really simple background and then a character front and center. And that's what usually grabs me. And then the colors, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, just speaking as a bookseller, for me, the big thing, and especially with middle grades, I have a little bit of a pet peeve about scary books. Because if the book is scary, I want that cover to look super spooky and scary. Because in middle grade especially, the kid either wants a scary book and really, really wants a scary book. So they want to know it's scary, like, ahead of time. But there are also kids that are super tender-hearted at that age, and they really don't want a scary book. And I want that kid to know that they can look at the cover and go, this is not for me, and put it back, because it's not for them, right? And so I guess if I like have a thing about middle grade books, I'm like, if it's a scary book, it better look scary, so that kids can know, because kids can really, I mean, for a child, for example, who's very prone to nightmares or in the throes of dealing with anxiety, they really need to feel safe, right? And I don't ever want a young reader to feel like the cover of the book lied to them. That's a bad feeling. Like for me as a bookseller, right? Because I need that cover to do at least half of the work for me, right? I read probably maybe 150 first chapters and summaries every single year, in addition to everything else. And I can't read the whole book. I really have to rely on that summary and, you know, a sense of tone that I get from a chapter or two. And so I need that book cover to do like that other piece of the work. And I know librarians are in the same boat. So that's sort of my soapbox moment for the day.
To go in and add real quick that I admire about the whole font thing, because the title of my book, Barefoot Dreams of Petroluna, is so long, and I used to get so nervous about, I'm like, what if they just cut it in half, or they, you know, they're going to have to do away with something, but they figured it out. It's amazing, you know, that they fit it in there, because meaning, you know, having a Latinx background, I have, my name's really long too, so I'm like, oh,
I love a long title too. It's
best. So like, they always shorten my name in school, throughout school, because, you know, to make it fit. I'm like, I hope they don't do that with this, but yeah, they pulled it off. So I'm really happy, really excited about that.
That's great. Okay, and then does anybody have an all-time favorite middle grade book cover? Or something that like maybe you remember from your childhood or happen to have on hand?
I don't have it in hand right now at the moment, but for me, because I was a reluctant reader growing up, English was my second language, and it was always a love-hate relationship with English, and I always wanted to be a writer, but it frustrated me learning it. But the first book that showed me the magic was Catcher in the Rye. I found an old copy of it in a bus, in the city bus. I was running home from work, and that tattered orange cover with the carousel, just, that was the first book I read from end to end, and that made me believe that one day, hopefully, I could do this too. So it's very, every time I see that, I want to cry. So that's my favorite cover.
Anybody else want to weigh in there? I don't want to put you on the spot if you don't have a favorite.
Well, it's not really a favorite, but I have one that I really like that I happen to have on hand, and it's This Was Our Pact. I think this is gorgeous. But I must also say that the level of how I like a cover, how much I like a cover, is also influenced by the story. Like I when I saw this book, I thought the cover was great. That pulled me in, and then after I read the story, I thought, well, the cover is even better. So how much I like the story also influenced how much I like the cover. So, but the cover, this really, you look at this and you know that you're going to be in for like a really nice fantasy kind of adventure. So I thought this was perfect.
And the positioning is so great because the person looking at that is like, oh, here I am on my bicycle, ready to ride along. That's sort of drawing you in. I think that's super hard to do on a cover. So I'm always impressed when I see that being done.
Yeah. And the back also, usually the back of books, they have the blurbs, but it doesn't have it here. So that I really love that here.
I love wraparound covers too. Yeah. So
I think I'm the same way, in which I like covers, and then when I read the book, if I like the book, I love the cover because I feel like yay, this cover did the thing in which I read it and I loved it. Like it gave me that. So I don't know. I grew up in Mexico, so I grew up in a different market a little bit, and I feel like in the 2000s there was a lot of pictures for covers. So, and I've always been drawn to illustration. So I think one of my favorite ones was A Series of Unfortunate Events by Brett Hellquist. I think those illustrations were amazing. I bought all the books because I love the illustrations. I love the books. I think it did exactly what you were talking about. Like, it captured the book so well. Like, there's like, it's a little bit weird and like a little bit scary, but like mostly like, yeah, I just loved it. I remember just like being like so in love with those illustrations growing up. And it's gonna sound weird, but I really like the illustrations that I make for covers because I am a kind of my target demo. Like, I'm always thinking like, what would I have absolutely loved as a 12-year-old? What would have been like, I need to have this book. So yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, and the covers you make are gorgeous. Big fan of them. Yeah, absolutely. And I also shamelessly had This Is Our Pact as one of my favorites because it just so perfectly, it's gorgeous. But then the other one that I really love that I got to work on was Thanks a Lot Universe by the author's Chad Lucas and the art, get it in camera. The artist is Nick Blanchard and the designer was Marcy Lawrence. And that was one that like we gave the artist ideas and he ran with it in a completely different way. And it was 10,000 times better. And now I shamelessly just get to like see it every day at work. And I'm like, yeah, this is nice. This is pretty.
Excellent.
I also, it's so funny, I was thinking about when you were saying about the scary books, because Emily and I both have worked on a couple of scary books together. Absolutely my favorite genre when I was growing up. But I was pulling out a couple of my favorite middle grade books that I had like in storage. And I was realizing that most of them were paperback reissues with new covers, which it's funny when you're in the industry, we do so many paperback reissues where we kind of update these covers and you don't think about it as much as like, but like this was my version of it. And like, that's the one that you always remember. But so many of these books are horrifying covers. I can't believe that I picked it up and was like, this is my favorite book. This is Maybird, the 2006 by Jonathan Wayshak. This cover has some of the scariest images I've ever seen, but I remember looking at this and like,
wow. Oh my gosh.
I this cover so much. I was like, it's so creepy. But Emily and I just got to work on, I was working with her on the Fright Watch series, who Lorian was one of the creators of this event, I think. But just like, we got to work on this beautiful, it's like so spooky and
wow.
so exciting. But it's also so spooky, and I'm so excited for other kids that are like so drawn to the absolute fear of the scariest cover I've ever seen being in my storage next to all these other horrifying middle grade covers from my childhood. But yeah, no, just so exciting to look at what feels like, and also the similarities to what we're working on now.
Yeah, I love a good wraparound cover, and I'm going to sort of shamelessly show you the cover that Lindsay Moore did for A Whale of the Wild. And what I love about the wraparound of it is there we go. She's, in addition to being an illustrator, she has a degree in medical and scientific illustration, and she is a marine biologist. And so what I love about the back is it has all of these iconic bull kelp seaweeds from the Salish Sea. And her specialty in biology is she really loves algae and seaweeds and the whole microbiology of the seas. And I learned a lot from her when we were researching it. So that all together is absolutely stunning. And somewhere in HarperCollins's nearly abandoned offices at the moment, she did 7 different watercolors for this cover. Beautiful on canvas, absolutely, or not canvas, on the really good paper, absolutely stunning. I'm like, and what is happening with these lovely pieces of art? The Met, I hope. No. But anyways, I was so moved that she did so many versions of it, and that it just spoke so clearly to what she loved the most about the ocean too. That was really cool. So anyways, let's see, we probably have time for let's do a little lightning round of, are there any trends that you're anticipating in covers? That's kind of a tricky question, but if you have a trend that you're anticipating, let us know.
I think maybe bigger titles all around, because there's also like now there's audiobooks. And I mean, I just made like a cover for an audiobook, and it's a little bit different because it's a square. So it's like, you know, you're trying to be more shareable, like for the screen. So I think it is kind of like going a little bit in that, what I like is that screens do RGB as opposed to CMYK. And I love saturated colors. So I'm like, this is great.
Anybody else? I feel like we could actually have a whole other 40 minutes talking about the covers and the icons and the audiobook, because, you know, it's a different dimension. And yeah, so we could obviously talk for another hour and a half about this topic. Final thoughts, anyone?
Yeah, no, for me, it's color. Like Mirelle was saying earlier about the colors being more vivid, I think that attracts the young kids as well. And the way you were mentioning about the color coding, just they're more attuned to color now. So that's what's going to capture them. I think they're going to be more vivid. Like with my book cover, when they came back with the sketches, and even in the back, I don't know if you can see it here, you see them walking through the desert, which is a story in itself. They're pretty much escaping the federales, and just the colors, how vivid. It's a dark story, but just how vivid the colors, even though it's nighttime, there's warmth to it, and that family walking across the desert. So I think we'll be seeing more colors like that, but I'm not the artist, so I'm just the writer.
I have a more obscure one that I'm hoping, I guess this is me predicting a trend that I really want to see become a trend, so I'm putting it into the universe. Embroidery has been big on like covers coming up, like embroidered patterns and like embroidered type. That's what I'm hoping for 23, because I feel like most publishers are working on 22 still. So maybe not 22, but maybe in 23 we'll see a ton of embroidered covers, and
That'd
that's
be fun.
how fun.
Yeah. Very cool. Emily, did you have a thought there?
Probably just piggyback on with the colors thing. I feel like really bright colors for like literary or horror are like kind of coming back in like a retro way as well, like an 80s neon kind of vibe, which I'm very thrilled about because it just makes my bookshelf much more colorful and fun to look at. So yeah.
Emily and I try to put neons on every cover that we work on together. If I could use a Pantone neon, it's my dream.
Excellent. Well, I've had such fun this morning, you guys. I'm so glad that I was able to step in and talk covers with you this morning. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us and sharing your thoughts. Alda Dobbs, Remy Lai, Mirelle Ortega, Jade Rector, and Emily Daluga, thank you on behalf of the Middle Ground Book Festival. Take care.
Thank you.